NASCAR in the early 1970s was a whirlwind time for all involved. Thanks to a congressional mandate, the tobacco industry was effectively banned from advertising directly on television. The R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company suddenly had a huge marketing budget and nowhere to spend it. That was until 1971, when they struck a deal with NASCAR to rebrand the top-level Grand National Series as the Winston Cup Series. The following year, in a move that ushered in NASCAR's modern era, the schedule was reduced from 48 to 31 races, as all dirt tracks were removed from the calendar, and all races had to have a minimum race distance of 250 miles. In the previous decade, there were as many as 62 Grand National races held in a given year, consisting of many local short tracks that held races during the week. As such, it became difficult to track a season's points champion. With the new rules in place for 1972, the lower number of races became much easier for teams to navigate, and more notably, much easier for broadcasters to show to audiences. While the era of live flag-to-flag coverage was still around a decade away, this schedule change and advertising money from R.J. Reynolds helped build up NASCAR as a nationally recognized brand. In only a matter of years, drivers became household names not just within the confines of the Southeast, but in other regions of the U.S. as well. When you think of early 70s NASCAR, names like Richard Petty, David Pearson, Bobby Allison, Cale Yarborough, Buddy Baker, and even a young Darrell Waltrip spring to mind. All of these drivers forged legacies that crossed generations of fans, as most of their careers lasted for multiple decades. Today they are still talked about and highlighted for their iconic moments and fantastic achievements. However, there is one driver whose career has placed him in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and yet he rarely gets mentioned today. He deserves being mentioned in the same breath as his fellow legends, and yet, unless you're a die-hard fan of 1970s stock car racing, or watched him compete live back then, you probably don't know much about him. Younger fans may have heard his name, but they don't know anything about him or his career. That man is Bobby Isaac, the 1970 Cup Series champion and the holder of the record of the most pole positions in a single season. He remains in the top 20 on the all-time win list for the Cup Series and was named one of NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers in 1998. How is it then that a career like that can seemingly be lost to time? Today, I'm going to try to answer that question. Bobby Isaac, like many drivers before and after, gained his racing experience on the short tracks of North Carolina, most notably at Hickory Motor Speedway. He was a popular figure in the local short track scene. As fellow NASCAR legend Ned Jarrett put it, he had a lot of fans because the people in this area knew the background that he came from. Despite this, he toiled on the short tracks of the Southeast, grinding away for years until he finally made his NASCAR Grand National debut in a qualifying race for the 1961 World 600, ironically the same race that David Pearson ended up scoring the first of his 105 victories. Like many drivers back then, he ran part-time due to the nature of the bloated and overcrowded schedule. It wouldn't be until his third season when he started to see some success driving the number 26 Dodge for Ray Nichols. He won his first Grand National event first time out for the team, in the qualifying race for the Daytona 500, now known as the Dual Races. Back then they were a fully points-paying event that counted as a race win, unlike today. He followed this up by finishing second in the Spring Atlanta race and the Firecracker 400 later on in the season. A trend had started to emerge. Even though he was a grizzled veteran of all sorts of dirt tracks and paved short tracks, he was a master at the big superspeedways. After a somewhat successful 1964 campaign, he only ran 4 races in 1965, 3 of them being sub-20th place finishes. The lone bright spot was finishing runner-up to Ned Jarrett in the season finale, a 300-lap event at something called Dog Track Speedway in North Carolina. They really did race everywhere in the first 2.5 decades of NASCAR. Anyway, despite running several events for Junior Johnson in a Ford in 1966, it seemed as though his career on the top level of stock car racing was really hit or miss up to this point. The next season, though, he would join the team that would deliver him his greatest amount of success in the Cup Series. 1967 saw Isaac join K&K Insurance Racing, owned by K&K Insurance founder and motorsports enthusiast Nord Krauskopf. They ran a part-time schedule, only showing up at Daytona, Atlanta, Darlington, Charlotte, and Rockingham, presumably because they were the races that made financial sense to be there. Krauskopf was a businessman. He knew finance. Up to this point, Bobby Isaac had only run a minimal part-time schedule all 7 years of his Grand National career. In 1968, however, that would all change. He and the K&K team ran in all 49 of the season's events, a far departure from the 12 races per year that he averaged prior to 1968. For the season, he finished second in the standings to David Pearson, winning 3 races at Columbia, Augusta, and Beltsville, Maryland, all short tracks. You see, in those days, NASCAR paid more points the longer the race distance was. Pearson, despite missing 1 race, won 16 races compared to Isaac's 3, clinching him the title. Regardless, it was an incredible feat for Isaac and the K&K team to beat out Richard Petty and his team to second in the overall standings for the season, despite Petty also winning 16 races, same as Pearson. In 1969, Isaac had another successful season, this time winning an incredible 17 races of the 50 that he started, including the inaugural event at the 2-mile Texas World Speedway for the season finale. He also set the single-season record for poles in a single season with 19, which still stands today. However, he finished a distant 6th in the championship standings, behind James Hilton, Neil Castles, and Elmo Langley, none of whom had even won a race for the season. Petty and Pearson also had double-digit wins on the season, and their greater consistency led them to finishing 1-2 in the standings, with Pearson claiming the title yet again. As a side note, Leroy Yarborough won the Daytona 500, the Rebel 400 at Darlington, the World 600, the Firecracker 400, the Southern 500, and the Fall Rockingham race all that season, and he still only finished 16th in the points because he only ran half the races. While NASCAR did pay out more points for the big events back then, it still paid to be there and be consistent over the course of the season, which Petty, and to a lesser extent Pearson, had mastered in that era. 1970 was the crowning achievement for Bobby Isaac and Nord Krauskopf. The bright red Dodge Daytona raced to the championship, edging out Bobby Allison by 51 points in the final championship standings. While he and Allison had the same average finish of 6.8, Isaac won 11 races to Allison's 3, giving him the ultimate edge on the season. This would end up being the final full-time season for Bobby Isaac in the Cup Series, and he really went out with a bang. His 71 car became iconic around that time, as drivers competing in the front for the same team year in and year out was pretty rare. Richard Petty in the 43 and David Pearson in the blue and gold number 17 Ford stood out as well, although Pearson would eventually switch to the Wood brothers, and his time in the 21 car is what he's most remembered for today. So K&K's red Dodge Charger became a mainstay in the series in a very short amount of time. In 1971, the final year of NASCAR's pre-modern era, Isaac only started 25 of the 48 events, winning 4 times. In 1972, the very first season of the modern era, Bobby Isaac would earn his final Cup Series win at the Spring Rockingham race. It would also be his final season with K&K Racing and the 71 car. (1973) is where this story takes an abrupt turn. He had joined Bud Moore's team, now driving a Ford. The season was extremely up and down through the first 19 races. While he didn't win a race, he scored top 5s in the Daytona 500, at Richmond, Atlanta, Martinsville, and the World 600. In 9 other races, he fell out due to a mechanical failure, mostly engine troubles. At Bristol in July, he fell out of the race after 230 of the scheduled 500 laps due to an illness. At Atlanta the next week, he crashed out after 52 laps, ending his day early when it looked like he could be on for his first win of the season, leading 29 laps up to that point. When the series went to Talladega the next week, it would mark the downfall for Bobby Isaac in the Cup Series. On lap 13 of the Talladega 500, 1972 Rookie of the Year Larry Smith struck the outside wall in Turn 1 at nearly full speed in a single-car accident. He was taken to the infield care center on a stretcher, where he was eventually pronounced dead on arrival a short time later. The race continued on, and then something odd happened. Bobby Isaac came down pit road for an unscheduled pit stop. He then got out of his car, claiming that he had heard a voice telling him to quit racing immediately, or he would die. After getting out, he got to a phone booth and told his wife about what had happened. He claimed he had heard a voice tell him this, and all became quiet inside the car. He could not hear any noise from the engine, the other cars, or the wind. All fell silent. In his own words, he stated, "I wasn't afraid I was going to wreck. I don't have anything to prove to myself or to anybody else. I know how it feels to win and lose. I know how it feels to be a champion, and now I know how it feels to quit. It just entered my mind at that moment. I decided to quit, and that was that. Bud Moore didn't know I had quit until after the race. I didn't know about Larry Smith at that time." After this event, Bobby Isaac stepped down from Bud Moore's number 15 and only started 19 more Cup Series events, mostly at tracks around his hometown like Charlotte, Rockingham, and Bristol over the next 3 years. His time as a top-level competitor in the Cup Series was over almost as soon as it had become a reality. Tragically, the story gets even weirder thanks to the events of August 13th, 1977. Isaac is competing in a late model sportsman race at his home track of Hickory Motor Speedway. He's back home, back to his roots, competing on the famous North Carolina short track. Things should be looking up for him. With 40 laps left in the race, he comes in and asks for a relief driver. Historical weather reports show that it had reached 91 degrees that day. It was a true scorcher. After getting out of his car, he collapses on pit road from heat exhaustion. He is rushed to the hospital and is revived. However, he suffers a heart attack while in the hospital and passes away shortly thereafter. Just 13 days after his 45th birthday, a legend is gone just like that. It is a premature end to a life that certainly made an impact in many ways. There are several reasons why Bobby Isaac's career has been somewhat lost to time. Firstly, his time as a true threat in the Cup Series lasted for about 3.5 seasons. His rivals like Richard Petty, David Pearson, and others raced at the top level for well over 2 decades plus. It's hard to build notoriety when you're only at the top of your profession for less than half a decade. From 1968 to 1970, he had 31 wins, second only to Richard Petty's 44, and more than David Pearson's 28. For his peak, Bobby Isaac was well in the conversation with 2 of the top 5 greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. His 31 wins over 3 seasons is only behind Richard Petty, Jeff Gordon, and Herb Thomas for most wins in a 3-year span. He had an incredible run, regardless of how brief it actually was. But there is another reason why Bobby Isaac isn't often remembered today. He was not media savvy. Ned Jarrett said he didn't have a formal education. As a result of that, he just didn't say a whole lot. Steve Lado, author of the book Dodge Daytona and Plymouth Superbird, Design, Development, Production, and Competition, said,
Bobby was a mysterious character. He didn't give a lot of interviews. He didn't like journalists. So, there's not much written about him.
At this time, as national coverage of NASCAR was still in its infancy, many drivers were rural, undereducated men, and not many of them enjoyed dealing with the media. Darrell Waltrip in the mid-1970s was the first driver to really embrace the media aspect of the sport, which earned him the nickname Jaws from Cale Yarborough. However, those drivers that raced at the same time as Bobby Isaac kept going well into the 1980s. The events surrounding the 1979 Daytona 500 ushered in a new era of NASCAR, as it exploded in popularity after it. Guys like Petty, Pearson, Yarborough, Bobby Allison kept racing it into the more media-friendly era. They quickly understood working the media helps with sponsorships and building an overall brand. Even back then, these things were important. While the giant NASCAR marketing behemoth would not become a thing until guys like Dale Earnhardt, Rusty Wallace, and Jeff Gordon came along, the seeds were being planted all throughout the 1980s, when drivers who raced against Bobby Isaac made impressions on new fans across the country. Bobby Isaac unfortunately got no such opportunity. He had already passed away by the time CBS broadcasted the first live 500-mile NASCAR event. It's easy to see why, then, that a guy who was only a championship threat for a short amount of time and didn't like talking to journalists did not see much posthumous remembrance from a media apparatus that didn't exist until decades after his passing. That's not to say Bobby Isaac isn't remembered at all. He was inducted in the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2016, and his final tally of 37 wins, 134 top 5s, 170 top 10s, and 49 poles cement his place as one of the best stock car drivers of all time. I'm sure men like Ken Squire, Mike Joy, Buzz McKim, among others, could tell you more about Bobby Isaac than I have in this video. I felt like telling his story because it seems like it got lost to time of a bygone era, and the life and career of Bobby Isaac deserved more attention.